Oh, hey guys, what does this picture mean to you?
From Madagascar to Nepal,
members of Gen Z are taking to the streets in protest and making specific demands for social justice.
But when you look at America,
they're asking for $1.5 trillion, unlimited money for bombs, but insufficient money for the American people for their health care, their food, their housing.
Government corruption in countries like Nepal literally caused Gen Z to topple their own government. Yet in the United States, Gen Z have yet to accomplish that same feat, although the same level of neglect is still present. But why? What factors make it harder for Gen Z in America to revolt successfully compared to other countries? And why? Most importantly, there are factors in place for them to lead the greatest revolution any previous generation has yet to see. Well, to say that a Gen Z revolution in the United States hasn't happened yet wouldn't be completely accurate. Sure, the people who shouldn't be are very much still in power. People who couldn't care less about what happens to the world after they die are still screwing over the younger generation. But that's not to say that American Gen Z aren't already making their voices heard and haven't been for well over a decade now. Remember in 2019 when a bunch of high school and college kids walked out of school to protest the government's inaction on climate change issues? Imagine knowing the trajectory of where this planet you call home is heading, while knowing that the people leading your country won't even be alive long enough to see the fruits of the damage they themselves are causing. Gen Z in colleges across the world protesting the United States' involvement in aiding Israel, sending literal billions of taxpayer money to help fund a genocide, with the cherry on top being that we apparently have enough money to send for mass murder, but not enough to invest within our own country's future. So the issue isn't whether or not Gen Z in America are able to recognize and/or have the willingness to actually do something about it. It's more so, what factors do we need to have in place in order for a revolution to begin? Well, to get started, first we need loss of legitimacy. In political science, legitimacy just means the belief that a government has the right to rule. Therefore, a loss of legitimacy occurs when a large number of people no longer believe the standing government is acting lawfully, fairly, or for the benefit of its citizens. I mean, it kind of goes without saying that in order for people to be motivated enough to revolt, they need something to revolt against, aka corrupt officials that only care about benefiting their own interest while very literally neglecting their own citizens that are suffering. Y'all remember the famous line, "Let them eat cake"?
Let them eat cake.
Yeah, people think it came from the Queen of France at the time, Queen Marie Antoinette, who was in power until 1792 when France literally abolished their monarchy during the French Revolution. And you're probably like, oh my word, what could have caused this to happen? How about literally starving an entire nation by making their only source of food unaffordable, with an economy that was already failing, yet still overtaxing the lowest class of society, while the wealthiest of said society got all the tax breaks. Although historians believe she probably didn't literally say this, the overall sentiment was the feeling of how out of touch the privileged few in power are to the struggles of the common citizen. But I guess we're pretty lucky, right? It's not like, let's say, there's another example of another country woefully neglecting their people's basic needs, that can't keep their own economy under control while doing things that hurts its poor citizens, yet benefiting their wealthiest. Oh, I meant, well, at least a recent example of a government neglecting their people with a poor economy, doing things that hurt the bottom class while enriching the richest. Well, no, there isn't any current example of a country putting their citizens' basic needs last, with an economy growing worse, doing things that hurt the average low-class person while making sure all their rich friends get a pay bump. Number 2, severe underemployment and economic hardship. To some degree, there will always be some level of unemployment, underemployment, economic hardship, etc. in any country or government, whatever. Many of them go through some of the lowest economic periods in history for a brief period of time. But usually simply having a bad economy isn't enough for people to revolt. If that were the case, some of the poorest countries who've had bad economies for centuries would have revolted like 10 times over. So it's not just about economic hardship. It's about how much does the average citizen believe that this hardship is at fault of the politicians running the country versus at the fault of the things outside of their direct control. Enough people need to believe that the bad economy is as a result of the government failing to provide basic stability and not because of some pandemic or an oil rig exploding somewhere overseas. Bonus points if the economy is bad, yet they're still protecting people at the top. For example, people think the Gen Z revolt in Nepal was only because of the the government banning social media, but imagine the economy and the job market being so screwed that the only job you can get out of college after earning a 4-year engineering degree was your local supermarket, and it actually being common for people to leave the country just to find decent paying work. But you think, okay, well, this sucks, but at least everyone is going through this, only to find out that the children of the same politicians that are causing this situation to be bad are the only ones getting the good employment opportunities. This level of neglect and preferential treatment for those at the top is what causes a generation to be fed up, especially when there's no clear timeline or trust that the standing government can fix it fairly. But Tyreek, my country's government has been bad for years. Prices of everything are going up as a direct result of the decisions made by our leaders. Job market has no hope of becoming better. And as a matter of fact, AI has been projected to take a huge chunk of the job market in the future, and it seems like our administration doesn't care as long as it keeps making them more money. Why hasn't there been a proper revolt yet? Well, because we still need a trigger event. A trigger event is the spark needed to fuel the anger of a vast majority of people at once. Usually something so traumatic, so symbolic of everything that's wrong with the issues of society at the time that it literally cannot be ignored. Something that will become the catalyst for more and more people to take action. When Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on the bus in protest of Jim Crow, it was the trigger event necessary for enough people to boycott the Montgomery bus system, which then became one of the first major events that catapulted the US civil rights movement. When colonists dumped tea in the Boston Harbor in protest of Britain's absurd taxation without representation, it forced Britain to retaliate with harsher laws and regulations, which made people realize just how bad things truly were, which then led to the Revolutionary War. When George Floyd was murdered as a result of police brutality in 2020, it was the most tangible and clear example of the disproportionate treatment black people face when engaging with police. Something so in your face that millions of people gained the motivation to protest all across the country. Heck, literally when the Nepal government banned social media, that was the trigger event that caused the initial protest. Not because a bunch of young people were upset that they couldn't use TikTok, but social media was the main way people expressed frustration about the Nepalese government, the corruption, how the right things aren't being addressed. So when that form of communication became suppressed, enough people, namely Gen Z, realized just how screwed things are and mobilized effectively. To be clear, a trigger event isn't the cause of a revolution. It's just the moment that people finally realize that this is the final straw. Enough is enough. But then you think, okay, well, finally, enough people are angry. Finally, we have enough people protesting. Like, that's great, but not all protests lead to a government being toppled. So what really is the difference maker? What would a Gen Z movement need to go from a large protest to a full-scale revolution? Well, we would then need organized leadership and effective communication. Unfortunately, this step is easier said than done, but it's also not as straightforward as you might think. Long are the days where a movement or a revolt needed a single person or multiple figureheads to spearhead the whole operation. You may think that without a core person or group, that'd be pretty easy for a movement to die down. But ladies and gentlemen, what is organizational leadership other than designating people where to go and how to do it effectively? You see, what made the Gen Z revolution in Nepal so special is it was a case where an effective movement occurred without a core person to point a finger at. Because thanks to Discord of all places, Gen Z were able to coordinate where to march, maintain organization, document what was going on, provide live updates, and it's different people taking ownership to make this happen. Instead of in the past where you had to wait for instruction from some generic headquarters, someone from the group could literally just say, hey, let's meet up here, and then thousands of people show up. Great. So we have a reason to fight. Let's say, hypothetically, there was some form of trigger event that inspired millions of people to our cause. We have the ability to organize and communicate effectively, but alas, my fellow Gen Z, there still poses a problem. And that is, it is very, 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 very difficult for a revolt to be successful unless there is already some weakness or division within the government. You know that trope in dystopian movies where there's a character who finally realizes the system they've been upholding or reaping the benefits of is actually, evil, or those henchmen who finally disagree with the direction the main antagonist is going. Yeah, we need something like that. Not necessarily for the purpose of having someone on the inside to help us, although that would be great, but there needs to be some sort of internal division, some sort of confusion that will make it difficult for them to stand firm on any decision. Let's say major political players resigning after realizing the party they support isn't functioning anymore, or a House of Representatives that can't seem to pass any bills in either direction, or even better, when military or police forces criticize the government. Literally, the Russian Revolution of 1917, the military refused orders to shoot protesters and sometimes even joined them. And once an organization's security forces turn against them, it's usually not that long after when they realize they may actually have to listen to the demands of the common citizen. And you want to know what's even better than that? When the elites stop supporting government actions, aka major donors and corporations stop sending money, religious leaders publicly condemn the government, judges actually realize that they're meant to support justice, not support whatever the hell the sitting leader wants to do, and all that pressure with the backdrop of ongoing protests make it more and more easy for a government to finally reverse major decisions. And I know I keep talking about Nepal, but look at how crazy this is. The government banned social media on a Thursday. Gen Z started protesting that following Monday, and the government backpedaled the literal next day, and the prime minister quit that same night. Now, if that ain't aura, I don't know what is. Okay, that's enough talking about other countries for now. Let us narrow it down a little bit, huh? Because as we saw earlier, it's not that Gen Z in general are not willing to fight for the change that they believe in. And it's not as if Gen Z protests aren't working. Today, literally today, the day I'm recording this, Gen Z in India are revolting against the absurd education system, demanding the resignation of the education minister. And they won, by the way. Let's go. So, is there a reason why a million Gen Z can't march to the White House right now and seek the change that they're looking for? Yes. Yes, there is. The reason why it's been more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult for Gen Z in the United States to revolt successfully compared to their overseas counterparts is because they have a larger decentralized government. The government's just bigger. It's a country that's roughly 340 million people in population, 3 branches of federal government, 50 state governments, and literally thousands of local county or city governments. It's much more decentralized than Nepal, for example, and although, yes, their government is also broken down into multiple branches of power, due to how spread out the powers of the US government are, there is a larger gap American Gen Z need to cross to put pressure on the federal level. For example, a large protest in Wisconsin probably won't put the same pressure needed to cause a major change in DC, unless something, drastic happens. But even with the appropriate size and strategy to finally put pressure on the big dogs, we need to know who said big dogs are in the first place. For the most part, Americans can't agree on the core cause of the issues. For the most part, we, Gen Z, already know what the main issues are. Tons of bad actors are getting away with the most blatantly obvious evil things made known to the public, yet these same people who still hold positions of power probably won't ever know what the inside of a jail cell looks like. You know what we already spoke about before. We apparently have more than enough budget for wars and genocide, but God forbid some of that taxpayer money goes towards making sure every child gets lunch at school. Job market for Gen Z coming out of college has been pretty bad for a while now, but it's not gonna get any better. Anthropic AI's co-founder literally admitted that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level jobs within 1 to 5 years. The fact that that sentence alone hasn't caused us to rain fire and brimstone until every AI company is destroyed is a miracle, by the way. But instead, more money is being pumped into AI data centers, driving up costs across the board, but especially for local communities, literally negatively affecting the environment. But it's almost as if the people in charge don't care as long as they get the pay cut. But with how individualistic American culture and thinking is by nature, and the amount of factors that are in play that bring these issues to light, it's very difficult to unify against one root cause or major enemy when people can't even agree on who to blame and or what solution to fight for. If you're talking about the job market and Gen Z's unpredictable future in the workplace, In general, people agree that something needs to be done, but Person A thinks the problem is because corporations are prioritizing shareholder profits over expanding their workforce. Person B thinks it's because AI automation is killing entry-level jobs, but Person C thinks it's because immigrants are coming in and taking all the good jobs. Technically, all three people want a similar end goal, but the vision to accomplish it is too divided. A lot of the views and wants of either side directly contradict each other. Compare that to Nepal, and the pathway was a bit more clear in comparison. Not only was the job market horrendous, but the issue was it being bad, and the nepotism of political leaders' children being the only ones able to get good work. There wasn't much division or confusion on who the enemy was, because the fight was targeted more so on the negligence and blatant favoritism of those in power, making the solution as straightforward as wanting the current head of the administration to step down and be replaced. If the fight stayed broad, like simply saying, fix the job market, it's easy to get lost in the sauce on who to blame, and it's likely people won't be willing to fight. Speaking of willingness to fight, probably one of the biggest differences between the US and other countries, and why it's harder for Gen Z to be physically motivated to go out and make a difference, is that our current system of elections provide an alternative path for most people. Elections, as in seemingly the ability to directly choose who's in charge at different levels of the government, change how frustrated people choose to spend their time and energy. In most countries, when deciding the prime minister, it's not the citizens who directly vote in the leader of the country. The citizens vote in members of a group of people to represent them within the government, a House of Representatives, the composition of which usually consists of people from two political parties, and depending on how much power either party holds, aka which party holds majority seats, for example, the leading party usually has no problem choosing the prime minister on behalf of its citizens. Notice how, for the most part, there's a pretty big gap between the average citizen and choosing the administration in power. However, in the United States, you can elect people in the House of Representatives, but although you can't elect who from either party should be running for president, at least you directly elect the administration leading the country versus indirectly choosing based on what the representatives decide. This feeling of choice makes it harder for Gen Z to fight the system when it feels like there are so many different avenues to seek change. For example, in the United States, you can expect a new federal election every 2 years. And since the president only holds a 4-year term, even if things are terrible now, some people might think, well, I'll just wait for the next election. And whether or not change actually happens is a completely different debate on its own. But the point is, there's a feeling that you can directly cause change without having to march on the streets. If you hold the opinion that voting doesn't change anything in the US, imagine living in a country with significantly less opportunity to directly elect leadership and believing that nothing's changing. Most times, protesting is the best avenue they have to let their grievances be heard. But if I had to rank all of these and give the most likely hurdle as to why Gen Z in the United States have yet to create a solid revolution, it would have to be that we've become too desensitized to evil. Do you still get that same feeling, that same visceral reaction when you hear a story about a school shooting today as you once did, let's say, 10 years ago? When you hear another story about a PDF file getting away with the crimes they committed, getting special treatment, are you conditioned to believe that it's normal for people with money to get away with things and keep it pushing? When you hear about the government potentially putting our basic constitutional rights in jeopardy, do you think, well, the crazy old people leading the country doing crazy old people things again? When the leaders of a nation say or do something absolutely damning, is it cause for alarm or just another Tuesday? Point is, there's so many things that the average citizen can look at that should be fixed and addressed, that are all varying degrees of seriousness, that it's almost confusing. It's confusing to make a big deal about guns and school shootings when there's already been 100 and the year is only halfway done. Isn't it normal? It's confusing to make a big deal about how immigrants are being treated when the official White House social media page are making AI videos mocking the situation. Isn't that normal? It's confusing to constantly keep complaining about the prices of everything going up after promise after promise after promise of things supposedly getting better in the near future. Isn't that just normal now? And we all know with social media being the way it is, you could hear a story about a shooting and an assault within literally 15 seconds of each other and go on with your day without a hitch, because by the time you're able to gather your bearings and legitimately be mad about any particular topic, a fresh batch of new trauma is ready to be served to you on a silver platter. So yeah, that's just my take on why a true Gen Z revolution in the United States hasn't happened yet. it's very difficult, a very big hurdle to climb over. But here's why we're going to do it anyway. Have you ever thought to yourself, why Gen Z? What is so special about this group of young people that they're willing to go out and fight? It's because they're not special. At least not in that way. If you look back at every major movement, protest, revolution, what is the typical age range that you see? What, you think grandpa's busting it down in the streets? He is actually. But that's not the point. Historically, we've come to find that the age range of those who are most likely to be dissatisfied with the government and cause an uproar is 18 to 30. Pretty consistently, actually. During the Vietnam War, the silent generation and some early baby boomers were actively protesting in opposition of the United States' involvement in the war. College kids and other young adults protest on college campuses and other areas against the war until January 1973, when US troops finally pulled out. Same thing happened with the Civil Rights Movement. Obviously, every age range participated, but an overwhelming majority of people protesting and marching were college-age individuals. Tiananmen Square, 1989. College-aged. Russian Revolution, 1917, college-aged. French Revolution, young people took that over as well. And you just have to wonder, why? Why that age range specifically? Why aren't people in their 40s and 50s taking over and leading the charge? Don't they have more experience? Well, think about it. You're talking about a group of people with the most to gain and the least amount of responsibilities in this point of their lives. We're talking about people with no mortgage, no kids, no job, protesting the fact that they'll never buy a house, the economy isn't good enough to justify kids, and that their degree isn't good enough to get a good job. The only thing they got is time. They literally have less to lose and benefit the most because they will most likely be alive long enough to experience the future they're fighting for, versus people who have been invested in the system for a long time, who might already have a home, an established career. Even if they recognize that the situation is bad, even if it technically affects them as well, and agree with the movement, they aren't as likely to fight as hard due to them having more to lose ultimately if the wrong things get changed and, literally less time because of more responsibility. Cool. Young people throughout history have revolted a lot. Great. But why Gen Z specifically? What about this specific generation seems to be gaining more momentum than previous ones? This might be a shocker, but maybe that damn phone ain't a problem after all. Huh? Nepal is the perfect example of how fast information can spread and how quickly a movement can be organized. Back then, a baby boomer would have had to get the word out via flyers or word of mouth. Or, the national news broadcast showed something horrific enough for people to want to do something about it. Getting a movement organized could have taken days to weeks on the short end. Versus Nepal, where Discord was literally the backbone of the communication and organized a revolution that weekend. And Gen Z has proven time and time again that they're able to organize quickly and efficiently. India Gen Z protesting the Indian Parliament's negligence regarding India's education system. One person created a satirical political movement Instagram page, and in 4 days, it literally gained 5 million followers. And not long after, in the beginning of June, demonstrations were already well underway. It's obvious that Gen Z is pretty politically activated, but at least in my opinion, they're also more likely to see through BS, and not follow blindly what someone says just because they're in a position of authority. Tyreek, this is great and all, but why American Gen Z? Why Gen Z in the United States in specific? Why are you claiming that they will be the ones to lead the next revolution, especially when they haven't followed suit yet? Because, ladies and gentlemen, the puzzle pieces are already there. With everything we've known about this country's leadership, the blatant decisions being made that clearly show a disregard for the future of the younger generations, do we not have a loss of legitimacy? In that same vein, if there's one thing we know about Gen Z in America, we is broke and we has time. So clearly, underemployment and economic hardship isn't something we're confused about. I mean, communication's a no-brainer, right? We've already ran through so many examples of how Gen Z as a whole can organize fast if they really wanted to, and they've proven that anyone could take up the mantle and lead a movement to the appropriate direction. And whether we want to believe it or not, our government is very divided, even amongst their own political parties. And obviously, there's no guarantee that, let's say, if it came down to it, half the police force or even a section of the government would come to our side. But it does mean there's a level of confusion that we can latch onto. I believe the only piece of the puzzle that is missing is a true trigger event. One moment in time that will force people to finally say, enough is enough. And I want to be very clear. I'm not hoping for, nor do I even want some new tragic or traumatic event to happen just so we can get motivated to get off of our butts and fight for what we believe in. And I want to be even more clear on the reality of what a revolution actually looks like. Preferably, it starts off as peaceful pressure, but the reality is, with that many frustrated people in one place, violence will be likely to occur. 76 people unfortunately lost their lives in the Nepal protests, and over 2,500 were injured. So this isn't some cute walk down to City Hall with your white picket sign and call it a day. No, if it takes a wrong turn, it will be dangerous. On top of the fact that there is no true guarantee that, let's say, if we're able to convince the current administration or leadership to step down from power, that the next administration would be any better. As a matter of fact, that happens a lot, right? Where the French took a long time to find a proper administration to hold the power. So the purpose of this isn't to incite violence, desire violence, or even to wish for a revolution in the near future. All I'm saying is, if things in America keep going in the direction that it's heading, a Gen Z revolution will no longer be guesswork. So until then, keep being active in your elections and hopefully choose people who actually give a damn about what happens to the world after they pass. Keep speaking up when things don't make sense. Keep booing CEOs at your college graduations when they try to shoehorn AI as a positive thing. I love this clip, by the way. And above all else, let's try to keep things peaceful. Sorry. Let's try to keep things peaceful. Whatever, do what you guys want. I am interrupting this outro to say that we are at 80K. Thank you guys so much. Would love it if we hit 100K by the end of the year. It's okay if we don't, but just want to bring it to your attention. Please subscribe. Please subscribe. Love you guys. See you guys soon. Bye. Here's the background. Here's the background. Here's the background. Bye. Outro time. Outro.